All units, citizen reports officer needs help, 3742 West Martin Luther King Boulevard. Citizen reports officer needs help, 3742 West Martin Luther King Boulevard. Code 3 incident 3142.
They ain't see us coming till we hopped up on the stage. Now the fan base jumping like we dunking NBA. You gonna talk about the hood? Nah, I got something else to say. Intellectual convo, sprinkle with some game. This shit sounds serious. That ain't every day. Plus, Peasy got them jokes. You know that nigga always playing. Who's the white boy? That's nice, yo. Homie a G. He from the hood, plus he speak like he got a degree. What's up with XL? The guard, he a battling beast. Supreme knowledge and equality to round up the team. 4 dudes from the dirt with our eyes on the goal. Took coal, applied pressure, and made it a diamond throne.
All right, y'all. Welcome to the Diamond Throne podcast. This is our new segment, A Seat at the Throne. It's your man, Nice. I got Chopper 038 with me, and we got a special guest in the building.
Ummagee.
My man, Till. Shout out to Till. What up, Till?
What's up, bro?
First guest for a reason, you feel me? Because we ain't just bringing anybody on. We're very selective with who we bringing up here, bro.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
You know, we go way back. You know what I mean? You got a crazy story to tell, a great story to tell, in my opinion, a story of redemption. And when we all spoke amongst the fellas, I said, you know, everybody's inbox is full of people that want to come on.
Right.
And you was there, and we had to sit down, and we said, yo, let's bring Till on, yo. Till is a great first guest to have on. His story's amazing, so let's get right into it.
Okay.
So let the people know who you are, basically, and where you're from. Let's start with that.
When you say who I am, do you talking about me now or who I was?
That's everything. Let's start in the very beginning.
I like that.
Okay, so who I was I feel like I was someone that was a misguided person. I grew up in the Dorchester section. I grew up on a street called Greenhays Street between Lawrence Ave, Magnolia Street, and DeVille Street was a block over. So that was the better part of my childhood. And I feel like that's what kind of led me into a lot of dead-end streets, if you get what I'm saying.
And around what time? What era was this?
This was my childhood was in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay, so this was early, little ways back now.
Right. This was
when Boston was a lot more. Don't get me wrong, Boston is still violent, but it was. Factually speaking, it was just a lot more violent back then.
Yeah, it was a lot more violent. You know, unlike the national gangs like the Vice Lords or the Gangster Disciples and things like that, or the Blue and Red Rags. You know, the neighborhoods in Boston took on to team hats that identified, you know, each gangs.
I like to call it block banging. I think out in East Coast is more block banging type thing. Or maybe for Mass. I can't really speak for anywhere else, but in Mass it seems to be more block banging than anything.
I think that's appropriate. Facts.
Especially when you go to Boston, because when I first went to Boston, I remember I had a certain hat on, and one of my people was like, yo, you might want to take that off. And I was like, why? It was like, yo, because, you know what I'm saying, out here, that's for a certain hood. And I was like, oh, shit.
Right.
I mean, I know where I was from, dudes wear certain hats, but I wasn't even thinking.
And that was the climate that I was raised in, and I feel like it gave me a lot of anxiety, you know, early on in my childhood. And I think that anxiety formed a, you know, survival 101, either fight or flight. Because, you know, when you're coming up, and it's funny because looking back, right, I see now that I really wasn't a threat when I felt that I was a threat. At 10, 11 years old, I was very anxious. You know, I had anxiety as if people knew that I was an enemy, you know, and then when you get older, you realize, you know, these were just things that formed in my mind from the trauma of my childhood, so to speak, because, you know, I really didn't feel like I chose the hood. I feel like the hood kind of formed around me. And early on, I learned that the hood either can protect me or can exploit me.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let me ask you a question. When we were speaking before, you had told me that you actually grew up with both parents in the house, and that your father was actually a cop.
Right.
Right? How did that have any effect on you outside of the house with people knowing that your father was a cop?
I don't think it did because my father was a police officer. but we didn't really see that side of him. Like we saw him because I think he worked the late night shift. Like I played with his badge and stuff like that when we was inside the house, but we were really, really young. But in the neighborhood, we just seen this crazy, wild old guy. Like my homie my homie Joey, who lived across the street, he wore a hearing aid, so they had a deaf child sign in the neighborhood. And like one time a Spanish dude was coming through with the locomotion, like the loud, the loud car. And my father came out, him, a broad day light, just really like on some wild stuff. So I don't think the neighborhood really saw him as like a cop. And then I'm just going to just be really, really honest with you. He was into drugs. And so because of that, although he was this police officer at night, my mother was also a nurse who worked at the Boston City Hospital, now known as Boston Medical. But, this dude was doing all types of stuff in the neighborhood as far as like drugs and women and all of that type of stuff. So I don't think that aspect didn't really come to me.
Okay. How did it make you feel if I know my father was a drug addict.
Mine's as well.
Okay. I know I used to feel some type of way about
Right.
that. Like my
Right.
pops is, because people, oh, your pop's a crackhead, or,
Right.
I used to want to, and why my father got to be the crackhead, because
Right.
growing up in the hood, at least in our era, we
Right.
can all say that doing drugs wasn't a cool thing, right?
Right.
How did that make you feel knowing that, because your father smoked crack, right?
Right. And so I think that for me, it was almost like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of thing. I think what bothered me more was looking back was the surprise that in a way that I had found out at that time, because he did not look like a traditional crackhead. And I saw crackheads in the neighborhood, but we're talking about a decorated veteran, a police officer. He taught me pathology. He did autopsies on the weekend. He worked at the WILD as a disc jockey. So we're talking like a well-seasoned person.
Right.
But I feel like the way that I found out was only because that's what hurt me the most, so to speak, because we was roasting each other, me and the kids from the neighborhood, and I was kind of like confident and cocky because we grew up in a 6-bedroom house, and before the crack, dynamic really took over my father, like we lived like really, really kings like in the neighborhood. So did a lot of families. We were middle class, and so I kind of had a sense of pride and arrogance because I had a 2-parent household. We had the latest cars, the latest toys, and so when I was teasing the kids that I felt were less unfortunate, like it's crazy. One of my aunts said that I really didn't understand until adult, laughing sketchy, because as I was cracking on them, like, man, you dusty, man, look at your moms with the Jerry curl, and it's like, that's why your father's a crackhead. And I'm like, yeah, all right, know the F. And then it's like all the kids were laughing. And so at that moment, it brought back something to mind when my mother was explaining to me a letter when my father had disappeared. Now I've come to the realization he was in, a rehab, traditional rehab as we would know it. But at the time, he disappeared, and she was reading this letter to us. And, she was basically explaining this disease that my father had, that forgot to take his kids to the store to get candy or take his daughter to get ice cream. So now when I started putting all these things together with him going into Pam, God
That's
rest
how it
her
was broken
soul.
down to you? He has a disease where he forgets
Right.
to like take the kids to the
Right.
store. That's kind of a dope way to break it down. I
Right.
wish my mother broke it down to me like that.
Right.
That's dope. Go ahead, keep
So
going.
I think the shock of initially of how I found out, I think that's what really bothered me the most, because I really didn't know that was what my father was going through.
Okay. So growing up, clearly, at some point you got introduced to the streets.
Right.
Where you lived, even though you may have been middle class financially, right? Like middle class financially, but you lived in the hood though.
Right.
Right? Okay.
Right.
Just so people they know, like, you can be middle class financially and still live in the hood.
Right.
Okay. So at some point, you got introduced to the streets. What introduced you, or who introduced you to the streets?
I mean, the streets was in my family dynamic, and I can elaborate by saying, my uncle was a very well-respected figure, in the neighborhood. My uncle Fruit Man, he came out the feds, and he was selling dope. He had a fruit stand, and so he was selling dope out the fruit stand, and so they started calling him Fruit Man. And he flipped that fruit stand into a neighborhood variety store. So I feel like amongst other elements, like, because as I started to become more aware, like I said, this is early on, like we'd be playing kickball and it's like, yo, kids going, it's about to be a shootout. And so you're like, what's going on? So this is when other hoods were starting to invade our neighborhood. But then when you start putting all these other different elements together, my father, I think one of the many things that he did, because he really didn't have enough time to do many things with me. One time after football practice, he took me to my Uncle Fruitman's store. Looking back, he probably was doing a drug transaction, but I didn't realize it then. And so literally, man, he walked me in. I was probably 10 and a half years old. And when I walked in the store, it was crazy because I remember my mother having closed door conversation with my older brother Buzz about him not wanting him to go to this environment. Now I'm walking in and I swear, no exaggeration, it was like you walking into the Carter from New Jack City, like literally guns right in the open, like just people standing around. You got all types of just undesirables. And then literally, like, when, I guess now looking back, when my father did the transaction on the sly, he's like, go say hi to your uncle. And I literally walked in. You had to walk through the whole store. And literally, as soon as I got to the back room, my uncle looked up and he had a plate of cocaine in front of him. He had cocaine on his nose. There was a machine gun next to him. And it was like, what did I just walk into at this age,
Was Fruitman on your mother or father's side?
That was my mother's brother.
Okay.
Right.
So when you saw all of that, how did you feel? You were young, right?
Yeah, I was 10 and a half years old because I played for the Mattapan Patriots, right? And so, I remember this vividly. And so my mind was blown because I never really saw this type of stuff so up close. And I almost felt like, how you're put in a position where you feel like you see something that you're not supposed to have saw, but then it's like, this is my father who's got me in this environment. Mm-hmm. So, but I still felt like I knew better,
I wasn't supposed to see it.
And so I was just blown away. And so then I met my cousin, and he might have been like 12 and a half years old, and he looked just like me, but he had on all his jewelry.
Was
and then
that
I
Fruitman's son?
Yeah, my cousin Ronald, who was Fruitman's son, he was in his element. And I'm like, how is this kid? And I never saw him. I don't recall ever seeing him. I'd only saw my uncle once at that time. Then I saw my brother, and it's like, I got my cousin who's almost 13, jewelry on, and then he looks like my brother. And then it's like, I'm 10 and a half, and I'm seeing it's like, this is like the family business. And if I could take a step back, I come from a long list of entrepreneurs in my family. My grandmother, she had 3 families in the neighborhood, and she had an old folks home on one of the floors. So she fed them their foods, their meals, all of this type of stuff. So I saw that. My mother used to have a hair salon on Lawrence Ave, which was right a corner from my house. And people would come in and she would be hustling. They would be selling all types of different things. Now I'm seeing this aspect of it. So now I'm like, wow, I've grew up seeing people with that entrepreneurial spirit in my family. I'm thinking now is this the new wave of what our families, specializing in,
Mm-hmm. So you said your brother and your cousin at some point, were they already involved in things and you didn't realize, or at that moment you kind of realized they were involved in certain things could be with your uncle?
No, I knew right away because, like I said, I recall trying to go into my mother's room, and at the time she was having a closed door conversation with my brother, and I kept recalling her say, I don't want you at the store. I know what's going on.
Kind of like a Bronx Tale where the wife didn't want Cologeno going to the bar, right?
Yeah.
All right, so
I don't want you down on that corner.
Get away from the bar. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, so clearly your older brother was an influence, right?
Right.
But who influenced you more, so to speak? Was it your older brother or what you saw your uncle doing and who the person your uncle was kind of in the neighborhood? Which one influenced you more? If I'm guessing them two might have been major influences in your life, right?
Right. I feel like at the time that I started becoming aware of that, I feel like everything else started forming in the neighborhood around me. And so as I laid in my bed that night thinking about the events that I had saw, I started looking at different elements that were going on around me in my neighborhood. And so it was like, now I see these things, then I feel like, after that night, one of the days that I came home from school, there was an older gentleman on my porch, and he had gold cap teeth, and he's like, he said he was looking for my brother. And so I'm like, okay, cool. And he's like, yo, I'm your mother's cousin George. Like I used to change your diapers, and so I ran up excited because, like I said, my brother really wasn't home. I didn't have an opportunity to really spend that much time because he was spending his time at the store. And so as I ran in, I was excited and I barged into the door. My mother used to always tell me, one of these days you're going to see something that you're not really supposed to see or you don't want to see. Mm-hmm. And I bust in and he was bagging up, work. Word. And I almost got, like I was like, oh shoot, because I felt like I was going to get in trouble. And so I'm like, I'm sorry, but cousin George was looking for you. And he was like, you want to do me a favor? And I'm like, yeah, what? And he was like, take this to him. And so he gave me, it was only marijuana, like some dime bags of marijuana. But I was excited to be able to do that. And so I ran down and I gave them to my cousin George. And then so he gave me the money, I ran it back up to my brother. And so after that, me knowing and identifying the Adidas box with the drugs, I wanted to make my brother proud. So now I started going in, and there was an older kid named Gary, and I feel like he had not Down syndrome, like maybe like autism, because he wasn't a weird kid, but he must have been 19. And he literally hung with me. He protected me, like he almost killed my uncle, like he was overprotective, but never did nothing weird. But I was almost not manipulative, but I feel like I started formulating certain different thoughts. And so I'm like, I already knew, like, Gary, they'll take him more serious in the neighborhood, so I can push this through him. So I told him what I had. But I had coke, which was crack. I didn't really know that, but I felt like it had to have been almost the same as the dime bags of weed. I didn't even know that was weed. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, listen, if you know anybody that want these, and he literally walked me through the neighborhood and he made plays. And then I went back to George's house where my family lived on Magnolia Street. And so I went in there and I was looking for George, and they're like, what you looking for George for? And I'm like, nothing. I just want to ask him something. And then I showed him like the same weed that I had sold him, but I didn't know. I'm like, did you need any of these today? And he bought them all for me. So now when I come back home, I put the money in a spot where the drugs was. And when my brother came home, I came and I was like, look, cousin George, I lied to him. I was like, cousin George needed this. And then Gary from down the street, he needs some people that needed the white ones. And he's like, you did all this on your own? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, cool. And it was like almost like a pass. And then
that made you feel like it felt good, like your brother was proud of you?
Yeah.
See, I think like life is like a series of crossroads, right? So like you ever sit and think back, like what made you gravitate more towards that? Because you said, your grandmother owned a few, 3 families, right. And your mother, she had the hair salon, you know what I'm saying? So you was around entrepreneurs, you know what I'm saying? So you got 2 different sides, a lot of people say the hustlers are entrepreneurs as well, you know what I'm saying? It just depends on what type of hustle you do.
Right.
So you ever like think about like what made you gravitate more towards that instead of like the other side, what your grandmother was doing, and like that choice. You ever either regret that decision or
I think that at that time I really didn't know any better, because I was Oprah Winfrey had a psychologist on. I remember this, and it always stuck with me. And the psychologist said, we're the same people that we were at 8 years old. We started to form our personalities at 8 years old. So I still see a lot of my respects of who I am. I still see that 8-year-old, boy within myself. But I feel like that the neighborhood started to strip me of a lot of my innocence, because like I said earlier, different neighborhoods was invading my neighborhood. And so after my brother, allowed me to make those transactions, it's like, he started also telling me other things like, listen, you got to hold it down. He showed me a hammer. And it wasn't the first time that I had ever seen a firearm, because, my father being a policeman, that was one of the things that they taught him in the academy. You bring your firearm home so that just in case you're not around, your kids are not going to be curious. So he was showing me, how a firearm works. And as my sister was running, because he also called her to show her, I waved the firearm at her, and he was like, give me that. And he snatched it, and he was like, don't you ever point a firearm at somebody unless you're going to use it. And I was like, because I'm thinking, why would I want to hurt my sister? I was just merely showing off.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the things that also stuck with me, because I never pointed a gun at somebody that I didn't use, unfortunately. But now I'm starting to have all of these people tell me who I'm supposed to be before I feel like I was old enough to make that decision. And then I met another kid that I feel like also was instrumental in me making these decisions. Earl across the street was almost my big brother, and he also influenced me. It's funny because he's a police officer now, and I always tell him, like, man, you kind of ruined my life, where you was a part of creating this monster, and then you went ahead and made the good decisions for yourself, and we laugh at that. But I met a kid that was maybe only about my age, or he could have been almost 11 when I was almost 11, and his name was Lil Jerry, and he was from 2 streets over on Intervale Street. And when I met this kid, I just couldn't. Now this is after going to the store. This is after my brother telling me how I'm supposed to be. This is after my father telling me never wave a gun or point a gun unless I'm going to use it. And this kid was standing amongst grown men. He had stole a pit bull, and these men had confronted him. Who told you to go in my backyard, little nigga? Things of this nature. And this kid stood amongst these grown men with his hands clenched. And so when I got to the corner of my street, I was coming from the corner store, seeing this. It's like, I'm like, who is this little kid? So he was acting like he was ready to fight grown men. And so remember, these is after certain seeds that were already planted in my mind. The older guys didn't do anything to him. But I went up and I introduced myself to him, and I'm like, you okay? And he was like, yeah. And I asked him his name, and he told me his name was Lil Jerry. Then he was like, yo, walk with me to my aunt's house. So we started walking, and as we walked up Magnolia Street and took a right on Intervale, walked down, it was like he knew all of the Intervale gang members. My cousin Nate, God rest his soul, was a reputable gang member from Intervale Street, but they lived in George's house on Magnolia. So it's like now I'm starting to see all of these different elements, and everybody's knowing him. And then, oh, Lil Jerry. And then my brother Buzz pulled up in his candy red Cadillac, and people, and I'm like, that's my brother. So now it's like my mind's starting to just go 100 miles and running, And I was still afraid. Like I can really admit that at that moment I was still a confused young child, And when we walked into his house, hit one of his older cousins, Gordy, who was also an Intervale gang member that I had saw in the neighborhood a couple of times. And the reason why I knew who he was because I never saw him up close, but I remember someone saying his name, and he had a pit bull that was able to climb a fence. I walked into his room, and it's like, it was like treacherous, and all his gang, memorabilia and just everything. This kid was literally, everything was just deep into the culture of his neighborhood.
Yeah, everything.
Now, this is coming after I just got into a fight with the Magnolia kids because they exposed my father. So I really didn't trust the kids that was at the corner of my street. It was like he was a new ally. And so now every day, now me and this kid's bond's getting bigger and bigger, but he just was doing just things that I wasn't doing at the time. Like we could be walking down the street and he'll run down on a kid that he thought was from another part of the neighborhood and literally punch him in the face or hit him in the face with a brick. Acts of aggression. And so I feel like now I'm starting to see what my brother's telling me that I have to be, I'm seeing what Earl is telling me that I have to do. I'm seeing all of this. So it's like I really didn't feel like at the time I wanted to be that, but it felt like I started to become it.
Yeah.
Because you start seeing kind of the money, the power, the respect, and all of that, and it's intriguing. A lot of, at least for me, it was. I feel like people that grew up in my era or a little bit before my era, like you're a little older than me.
Right.
I feel like that money, power, and respect really influenced a lot of us, and we based it off of some of the people we saw that was already in the game before us.
Right.
And then you start hearing the things that your brother is saying to you. You got to be tough. You know what I'm saying? You gotta hold it down. And then you see little Jerry doing things like being tough, holding it down. You got the other dude who's influencing you, Earl, and then you got your uncle who's basically a well-known figure in the hood.
Right.
And all of this is starting to come to fruition and understanding on your behalf, right?
Right.
So it was definitely must have been influencing you to the point you're like, I want to be like this. This is what like I have to be a certain way because they're telling me.
Right.
So it seems like everybody respects my brother. It seems like everybody respects my uncle. It seems like everybody respects Lil Jerry and Earl and stuff like that. So naturally, you kind of feel like I got to do certain things like they're doing in order to get my respect and things of that nature. So then all of a sudden, you don't really become the hood becomes you.
Exactly. Right.
I bet. So as you got older, obviously you're in the streets, you're selling drugs like a lot of us were, you're getting into some type of problems must occur at some point, right? What was like the first real incident where you felt like your brother showed you a gun and said, if you ever need it, it's right here? What was the first time you felt like you ever really had to grab a gun?
Had to use it?
To just use it or grab it, whatever.
Well, so Lil Jerry, like I said, and it's crazy because the older gang members they started really, because now looking back, they was trying to keep us from doing the things that we were doing, because I vividly remember gang members like Darius, Terrell. I didn't understand why they were doing the things that they were doing to us, but as I got older and I was in the feds, they was like, man, see, this is exactly, we knew that this was going to be you, and we knew you was going to be serious, but we was trying to prevent this from you, little bro. And so it was like I didn't understand it at that time, but they knew we were stealing their guns. And Lil Jerry, we stole a 2.5, a chrome 2.5, and it didn't have bullets. And I didn't know it didn't have bullets at first. And as we started graduating into jumping kids, and like I said, I never claimed Junior Interville like he did. He was a diehard Interville gang member. But you got to remember, like almost every street in my neighborhood was starting to have a hood in it. So these are kids that I went to elementary school with. So Jerry started clashing with everybody. And I think he was maybe territorial about our friendship because I was his only voice of reason at that time. But I was, at first, I didn't really want to, I wasn't from his street, even though his street's a part of my neighborhood. It's literally a block and a half over. And so, but also at the other corner of my street, across from Mascoma Street, my friend Fat Mike, you know, he was a Faiston Street, you know, probably junior Faiston Street member. We didn't realize it at the time. Then also the kids from Magnolia Street would eventually grow up to be Magnolia Steeler gang members. All parts of my hood. So it was like Jerry but other kids in the neighborhood started to kind of shy away from me, you know, because of my relationship with Lil Jerry. So at first it was the 2.5 with no bullets. And then unfortunately at 14, it would be me actually stepping into a street act of aggression and using a gun.
How did it make you feel the first time you shot somebody?
I'm gonna be honest with you. You know, at 14 years old, at that moment, I didn't even do it on some gangster time. It was, you know, I was hanging with my two older cousins, and you know, while we was hanging out, they was hustling, but I wasn't hustling at that moment because my little hustling stage with my brother Junior had kind of came to a pass because he had wound up going to the feds when they raided my uncle's store. My other uncle's older son, Sonny, was a gang task force gang member, a part of the police force or whatever. And so to get higher up and prove his allegiance to the police force, you know, he wound up setting his own father up. And so they raided, took everybody to the feds. My cousin Sonny would also wind up killing one of my close friends, Christopher, that went to elementary, you know, with me. And so at that moment, at 14 years old, it was like I was hanging with my two older cousins, you know, and because my brother and my uncle and them was gone now, the element of hustling kind of was. So now I was kind of about to ease my way back in unknowingly. And so as they was getting money, I was just hanging out with them. I heard them kept whispering about a car that kept going back through the neighborhood. I guess it was taking streets, so it looked like it was almost circling. And so when my cousin Sean had said, yo, if this car come back through again, I'm dumping on it. And so I don't know. I didn't recall me seeing that vehicle because I was like almost on the curb and they was like in the street because they was serving plays to cars. And so he was like, yo, Till, yo, go get the gun. And so I was just supposed to go get the gun at that moment. And so I ran up to go get it. And I'll never forget, it was a plaid couch, a raggedy couch on the 3rd floor of the multifamily house. And when I came back down, as I was coming back down to give it to him, I heard my cousin Kev, God rest his soul, yell out, Sean, look out. And when he said that, I saw this car that looked like almost slow motion. And so I just came off the porch firing on the vehicle. And I must have let off like 4 or 5, shots out of fear that they was gonna harm my cousin, because I'm starting to see people get hurt in these neighborhoods, and I'm starting to see people that I love, acts of aggression, and I'm remembering all these things have been planted in my mind, and now I'm actually kind of stepping into it unknowingly out of fear of my cousin being hurt, because he said that this was his enemies. I ran back up and I put the firearm under the plaid couch, and when I came down, my cousins, remember I said they was in the street because they were serving cars and they were under the street light. And when I came back down onto the from all the way from upstairs onto the front porch, I remember seeing a face that was familiar. And it was this older dude that used to drive a 5.0 car. And I used to like him because he looked like LL Cool J. And we used to be like, yo, that's my car, whoop, whoop. And he would be waving at us and he'd have the booming system. And I realized I just dumped on his car. And I'm thinking, yo, this dude's big. I should have probably kept the gun. But then, as when he saw me and my cousin's turn, because I came back down the steps, they're like, he's the one that just did this? Because, he was probably in his 20s. And they're like, yeah, whoop, whoop. And I instantly start kind of copping a plea because I don't got the gun on me. And he's not the enemy that I thought he was. I just did this out of fear. Mm-hmm. Wasn't like I premeditated to do this. So I'm like, yo, I'm sorry, my bad. I thought you was somebody trying to kill my cousin. And he was visibly shaking, and his girl was bleeding from her head. I don't know if I grazed her or it was the glass that, had went in her face from the windows being shattered by the bullets. And this grown man started literally just copping like, yo, if you ever see me coming through here, now you know it's me, little man, right? You ain't gonna shoot. And I ain't gonna lie, I felt like a sense of power, Yeah.
So, we got into that story, but I wanted to know, like, the first time you actually, I don't want you to get into the details of what, but I'm just saying, obviously, you had shot people before, but the very first time you ever had to shoot somebody that was like an op. No, not. I'm saying somebody that was an op, and you really shot him, and you shot. You're like, I hit him. Right. I know I hit him.
Right.
I just want to know, how did that make you feel?
Well, as you're talking about now.
Well, because you already dealt with him, so you said it gave you a sense of power, right?
Yeah.
But it might be different because you did that out of fear and you were just trying to protect your
But I know I could do it again.
Like, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
So the one time you did do it and it wasn't out of a sense of fear and you actually did it and you did accomplish what you were trying to do, how did that make you feel?
I felt invisible. Like I felt
invincible or invisible?
I felt invincible. Did I say invisible?
Yeah, invincible. Okay, yeah, invincible.
I felt invincible. Like I don't know, now I'm starting to form a deep sense of hatred. Like I remember literally before I used to go to sleep, when I would hear ambulances or fire trucks, I'd be like, oh my God, somebody's hurt. I would say prayers. Like I literally would pray before I went to sleep. Now as I start, stepping off the curb into the streets, I'm like, I wonder who got hit. I wonder who got killed. Like it was almost like these evil thoughts started to grow into my mind. So now, when I started having to do what I had to do in those situations, I didn't really see those as people. I saw them as almost like a sick, twisted game of GTA. And I also felt a sense of, in this video game of life, I had to get them before my game was over. And so I had no problem doing whatever I had to do in those situations whenever I had to do it.
So it really didn't bother you at that point?
No, I didn't care. I started not, it wouldn't matter where it was. It could be broad daylight. It could be in front of the whole neighborhood could be outside. The more people, the more fear that, you
kind of drive
you
off
put
fear
into
at
their,
that point.
into the hearts of others. Because looking back subconsciously, what I realize now that I'm no longer that person is the 8-year-old child that was in me was screaming out, I don't want to be a victim. I don't want to be a victim. So I'm going to be as aggressive as I have to be so that I'm not victimized.
Mhm.
That was only thing that I think that I was trying to do, but it was unfortunately the wrong way to do things, you know?
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question. Obviously you've had to commit, well, I wouldn't say had to, but maybe, yeah, kind of use the word had. When you're involved in that lifestyle, you gotta do certain things. Whether you like it or not. You kind of have to do it. If you don't, it's like the window opens, you gotta close it. So you did certain things, right? And now at this point in your life, as you're grown and you're older, right? Do you look back on it and say, damn, man, like, I really regret the things that I did because I didn't understand, how horrible I was really living, how fucked up I was really living, man, and savage that I was actually being, like,
Right.
like the people that you may have hurt or whatever, even if they don't say they don't see you the same way or fuck
Right.
him, whatever, but like, is there a part of you that says, damn, dog,
Just
I regret
remorseful.
doing that shit. I'm remorseful for that.
I feel like I live every day of my life living with the regrets and the remorse that I live with now that I know, because
What
You
did
know-
you lose by the lifestyle and the decisions that you made? What did you lose?
man, I feel like I lost a great deal. I had to talk to my mother, while I was in a hole under 4 restraints. And that was the last conversation that I shared with her. And that was also
In prison.
in prison, in a hole, locked down 23 hours, and I had to lock in. I had to deal with that.
And this
it
is
was-
when you were in the feds.
No, this was when me
Upstate?
and you was together.
Oh, when we were together.
Right.
Oh, all right.
And
Oh, so that's a
when I
little
threw the
fast
police
forward,
off the whatever. But
Yep.
and that was also the first time that I cried for my mother, but also cried for my enemies. I prayed for my mother's soul. I also prayed for my enemies,
And did it make you kind of, obviously it made you, what about crying for yourself? Like, damn, man, you fucked up till, like, look what you did, yo. Look at all the, now, my mom is dying. I can't be there for her. I'm talking to her over a phone. And that was the last time I heard from my mother, man. So, it's like, the things about prison that people don't realize is somebody could be young, right? And they say, I don't give a fuck. I could do 10 years.
Right.
And say their mother is 50 years old. Would you tell them something like, yo, you might be able to do 10 years, but your mom might not even have 10 years to live? Or anything could happen because of your own situation. You feel me? Is that like there's positives and there's negatives, right?
Right.
Is that one of the times where you were like, damn, like, I really could have done something different with my life, or I should have done something different with my life?
I just feel like this, when you look back, me talking to my younger self or talking to any kid that wants to make the decision to go into the dead-end streets that I'm coming back from, it's like, my question to them is, like you said, is your mother. I remember the first time I went out to go do my first bid, I hugged my mother before she was going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to go do my work because it was like me going into me becoming a gangster, allegedly, that we was our rite of passage. So I was proud, just as proud as a person going out to work every day.
Yeah.
Me going to do that first bid,
Yeah.
it was like I wore it with a badge of honor.
I can relate to that.
And so, my question now, my question to anyone that may follow in my footsteps is it worth hugging your mother knowing it might be the last time that you hold her? Or the 3 years that I missed out of my children's lives, that could have been 3 years. My son died at 13 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
I could have had 3 more years with him. And so is it worth losing a child, or is it worth, risking your life? Because the older you get, you start to really realize what you didn't know back then, and that life is very precious. It's fragile.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect to live to 18 years old. So when I was out there gangbanging like 18, at 15, 18 seemed like it was 100 years away. The older you get, you start to really value and cherish life. You start to have a different appreciation for life. Like I used to really lay in my bed and I would relive those experiences. I would smell the gunpowder. I would hear the people screaming. I would see the violence and the fury and the pain and the fear that I instilled in doing the things that I did. And I used to laugh. I would laugh at these things. I would take it all in the way serial killers probably do. And I'm not saying I'm a serial killer, but I would relive these
Became
experiences.
desensitized. To this.
Now, man, it's like I'm
I was going to say, how does it make you feel now when you reflect on it, though?
All I could do is just pray for redemption. I'm no longer the person that I was, and that's why I'm dedicating my life now to repair the damage that I've done. Because if I can stop one person from becoming an Ummagee or to reliving the things that I've went through, it's like, to me, it's just worth it, you know? Because it's like the streets are gonna break your heart, you know? Every day there's a new snitch, almost like there's a new pair of Yeezys. And you know, eventually what we don't realize when we start making a decision to kind of like go through these different through these different things is that we don't realize that our friends are gonna leave us through a casket, through a prison cell, you know, through not following the street codes. And in the end, if you're the one that is still living this, you still bought into this idea of this is who you want it to be, you're gonna realize that you're probably gonna have a lot of regrets. It's gonna break your heart, and you're gonna see that you really kind of like dedicated yourself to a cause that's not worth even being a sacrificial lamb for, if it makes sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense to me. I mean, I was young at one time. I didn't give a fuck, so to speak. Excuse my language, but that's just kind of what it was. You had that pumping through your veins. You didn't. You know what I mean? And as you get older, you start to learn that you have to care. You can't just not care, because not only do you hurt yourself, but you hurt other people around you that do care about you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So while you're doing the bid, it ain't just you doing the bid. Your mother's doing the bid with you. Your kids are doing the bid with you.
Right.
Other people are doing bids
Your
with
cousins
you, bro.
that
You know what I'm
dependent on
saying?
you, your
Yeah.
aunts, everybody that dependent on you, because you know I'm sure, like most of us, you know, that were living that life, you know, you was the man to the people that were around you. So like it's like cutting the head off the snake. You know what I'm saying? Like
Absolutely.
everything crumbles. You know what I'm saying? Like I know, you know, I can relate to that. My grandmother passed away in '05 when I was locked up.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I had a dope relationship with my grandmother. They wouldn't let me go to the funeral because she wasn't immediate family. You know what I'm saying? Like that shit crushed me, yo. You know what I'm saying? It was like one of those like, yo, I ain't never doing this again. Like I'm not coming back to jail. I'm gonna straighten my life out, blah, 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 you know, and you know, I seen like the struggles that like, you know, my then girlfriend, now wife, was going through with my child. And you're just living your life when you're growing up. You ain't thinking about all the people that that depend on you, that actually need you to be there, whether it be for guidance or a helping hand or whatever, you know. And like that's why I think it's dope, like where you're at right now. You know what I'm saying? Sitting here being able to tell your story, you know. I know you got the book, you know what I'm saying,
Right.
coming out soon. What's the title of the book?
So the title is called The Grief of a G. And that's because, again, you know, when we first, as misguided, you know, kids, we come into this and we think that this is just everything, like, you know, just the glamour, the ladies, you know, the fly clothes. And, you know, even now it breaks my heart to, you know, to see these kids, and I see them, and it crushes me, because first of all, when you look at what we're doing as a people, right? When you look at social media and you see kids that are buying into the glorification of things that aren't even real, like they'll go we'll buy a $3,000 outfit just to freeze it in time in the metaverse, you know, when we could have used that $3,000 to build a business or
Invest.
to, you know, to invest
Do
into
something
our
productive.
future. And then you look at how these kids are living now. These new kids, we're raising a generation of lurkers. You know, it's like a generation of peeping toms, and nobody really nobody really cares about people. We've been so desensitized, and we have so much hatred in us. Even my kids, I look at their social medias and it's like, what do you have a social media for? You don't have no picture, you don't have no pictures on it. You're just watching, but you're not even being social. And it concerns me because I feel like, as a society, we're sending the wrong messages. And so my book, is basically just teaching these kids why it's more important to, think, smarter and not harder. Because I used this example before. You might get up and you might have a job where you make $50,000 a year, and you get up and you look at social media and you see somebody that just posted a yammer. I just made 100K this week, and you thinking, why do I got to go to work? Like, my life just sucks. It's just lame, right? But what if you hear that same, yammer or dude was selling dog food a mile a minute? He goes and does 10 years in prison. Now in that 10 years, your 50,000 became 500,000. His 100,000 that he made that week, when he goes and do that, that's 10,000. So who really is winning if you could just stay focused? And so, my book is just kind of like sharing the flip side of what people really don't show you, because, we'll show you, when we balling and we got diamonds and we in VIP with, $10,000 worth of bottles that we can buy at the liquor store for $150, right? We'll show you, we'll show you the misconception of all of these things, but we don't show you what we're going through when that pack don't land. And, your blood pressure's high and you're sitting somewhere sick to your stomach, with diarrhea because you're trying to figure out who you can rob, or, what connect is going to, take a chance and give you something, hoping that your credit's good.
Or who trying to rob you? Who trying
what I'm saying?
What police is coming to kick down your door, or who's coming to take everything that you worked hard for? You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Feds come, police come, whatever, they kick down your door, they taking everything, especially the feds. They'll take every little car, they'll take your chain, the TV's too expensive, they gonna freeze your assets, everything that you got that you worked hard for. You know what I'm saying? So it just be like I feel you, bro. I definitely salute, man. I love what you're doing. I know you got the trucking business. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Because, again, and this is another one of the things. It was like, when I sat down and I had lost that $300,000 when I was doing illegal things, and this is all public information, that's the only reason why I'm speaking it. I'm not glorifying it. When I sat down and I really thought in that cell, I was like, I just literally lost $300,000 because I wanted to take, the fast route, and, I wanted to do this so I can be in a rat race to showing that I'm the man technically.
Right.
When I lived in Atlanta, I had 3 trucks, and by having those 3 trucks, literally I was in a position where I would have made well over the $300,000. I had to sacrifice every time I had to turn that cold cash back into the product and take that risk to do it all over again to make some product, right? I could have did this the legal way. And so it's like, when you start looking at, is what you're gaining worth what you're risking?
The risk over what's the
So,
return
risk
on
versus
investment?
reward.
dog?
So, ROI,
Risk
yep.
ROI,
So
I
I
said
was-
risk ROI, ROI, man.
So I was thinking about the trucking, and I was selfish because, I wanted to be a boss, but I didn't want to MYOB, mind your own business. Like, I should have gotten in that trucking seat a long time ago and really learned every aspect of my business. But it was cool to put someone else in, the trucking seat, so I got a trucking business, but I'm still doing all types of other illegal things. And so now the place that I'm in, it's like, I wouldn't trade this in for the world, because I feel like I've conquered a part of myself that, is talking to the 8-year-old aspect of me that, this is who you really wanted to be. This is who you wanted the opportunity of being 8-year-old self, You got misguided, and if you can stop kids from following your direction, but, look at you, there is hope that you can change even if you make mistakes, It's not the end of of it. If one of these kids are in DY, you know, you can don't give up. Don't feel like you have to live, you know, through these situations. Don't wait for the city to save you. Don't wait for the youth worker to save you, because a lot of times, you know, when something happens in the community, they use the violence to exploit us, but they really don't care. You have to care about you.
Yep.
You know, and parents have to raise their kids so the streets don't raise them. But, you know, there is hope. And that's what my book is, because when I read, you know, the autobiography of a LA gang member by Monster Cody, that was the wrong fuel for me, because that was what I was setting myself up. That was what I was setting myself up to be. I wanted to murder. I wanted to be a Monster Cody. But then when I read Nathan McCall Makes Me Want to Holler at 17 years old, and I sat in that cell, I was like, wow, you mean to tell me
there's
that
the other side
you can
to
make
this.
a mistake and you can be successful? And so that's what I'm hoping my story does to a kid that is going through what I went through.
So when can we expect the book, man?
It's coming soon. I'm actually going to be accepting, you know, pre-orders, because it's going to be coming out in June. We're doing, it's pretty much done now, but we're just doing the final steps and, you know, the cover and, you know, minor details like that.
Fire.
So, before we get up out of here, though, I kind of want people to know you have more than one legit business today,
Right.
and just let people know, without, you know, we only got a little bit of time left, but what different businesses are you involved in today?
So today I'm a jeweler. You know, my partner, shout out to my partner Stacks Custom, and I'm really, really thankful for that. Was something that I prayed on that opportunity, and it shows you the power of prayer, because I didn't think that I would be able to be a black jeweler from watching every step of the process to us making a project instead of being just a consumer. So I'm very fortunate, and you know, regardless of, there's certain situations where, you know, jewelry might change, or your customers, to be able to have that dynamic and the flexibility to change so that you can reinvent yourself in that. You know, I got the trucking. I'm also getting back into real estate when we are already in the final touches of constructing, you know, a house. I'm gonna say this: the reason why I really don't like to elaborate too much is because Joe Budden said something that was really, really that really touched me about speaking. He was like, I don't really share too much of my endeavors on social media, because all people do is put bad energy. So now I don't really show. I used to be so quick to throw it on the gram and throw it on this. I keep it to myself.
I don't do any of that. You know,
I hope everybody,
I don't talk no money shit.
Exactly.
I don't show nothing.
Exactly.
I don't do none of that shit. Even when you know, when I was going for the Carpenters Union to get into that, to just learn a new skill and a good career, and
you didn't say it until it was done.
Until it was done. And the
reason
reason
that.
why I said I didn't say it, I said because there be people out there, bro, that just push that bad energy out there, praying on your downfall, and I'm not even giving anybody an opportunity to do that with me, bro. So you won't hear about it until after it's done and it's already stamped and solidified, man.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? But you know, I thank you for coming on, bro, because the youth and other people, not even just the youth, bro, people in general need to hear your story, man, because you are living proof that somebody can change.
Right.
And you didn't just change your environment, right? You actually changed who you are as a person, bro. Because there are people out there who have only changed their environment, and that's the only reason why they don't behave or demonstrate the behaviors that they used to do.
Right.
It's because they're no longer in that environment. You're actually a person that said, yo, I made the decision to say enough is enough, bro. I'm not doing this no more. I've had enough reflection. I have regrets. I have remorse. And it's time for me to make a change. And I want to use my story to help other people, because I've done things where I've hurt myself, I've hurt other people, and this is your way of giving back. You feel me?
Yes, sir.
Amen.
So I thank you for coming on, bro. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
you know,
sir.
Thank you.
We're gonna bring you back
having
for a part 2 when the book comes out, man, so we could talk about, you know, the book and get into
coming
more
back,
into
right?
it. You feel me?
Oh man, I love to come
Definitely
back. I'm a fan of
coming
what
back,
you
bro.
guys got
Definitely
coming
coming
on.
back,
I'm a
man.
day one supporter,
You
and
know that, dog. Because we
I'll
got
definitely
history,
be back.
man. You know what I'm saying? All three of us got history up here.
That's a
We
fact.
from the streets
That's a
to
fact.
where we at now, man, and we just trying to push forward, man. So, you know, dog, that's why you was the first person we chose to have up here, dog.
I'm
Because
humbled,
there's a
man.
bigger picture, you feel me, bro?
I'm humbled.
So I appreciate you for coming on, man. And We out, man. This was a seat at the throne today, man. Me and Chopper. We got Ummagee. Look out for his book coming out in June, Grief of a G. Look him up on Facebook, Instagram. Facebook is Ummagee, Ummagee.
038.
038.
Ooh.
And Instagram is the same thing,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
You got Twitter?
Yep, I got Twitter as well.
Same thing.
My Twitter might be VVS Ummagee 038, or it could be, but they'll find me.
But they'll find you, though,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. They'll find me.
All right, bet it up, man.
Right.
And on that note, man, we up out of here. And remember, a diamond is just a piece of charcoal that handles stress well, man. We out.
Intellectual convo, sprinkle with some game. That ain't every day. Plus, Peasy got them jokes. You know that nigga always playing. That's nice, yo. Homie a G. He from the hood, plus he speak like he got a degree. The guard, he a battling beast. Supreme knowledge and equality to round up the team. 4 dudes from the dirt with our eyes on the goal. Took coal, applied pressure, and made it a diamond throne.